Hi, I'm Doug Johnson, and this is The Business of Life. Each month, we feature a local celebrity who will share with us one or maybe even more of their strategies for life success. Today's guest is quite a guy, and I mean that in a good way. He is an author, a coach, a consultant. He's worked with many businesses. He's an all-around great guy, and his new gig is as a charisma coach. He is author of 7 books. He has done some TV. He is a certified speaking professional, member of the National Speakers Association, and past president of the Ohio chapter. A warning about our speaker, however. We have to be careful because one of his recent clients described him as like watching popcorn pop without the lid. So it is my pleasure to introduce you to my friend, Kordell Norton. Kordell, thanks for being here today.
Thanks for letting me be here, Doug.
Not only do you pop like popcorn, but that's hard to say. It really is. Anyway, today we're going to talk about one of your favorite subjects, which is charisma. You and I go way back, and I'd like for you to give a little bit of your background, starting with the G word. And you know very well what I mean about that.
Yes, in the late 70s and the early 1980s, I was involved with a business, and we rolled out in North America no-name generic products in the grocery stores. Those white cans with black letters that say corn. So that was a fun business. It was an innovative, out-of-the-box kind of business.
Mm-hmm. And from there, what did you do?
Over a period of years, I then got involved in a fairly new product that was being launched at the time. It was called the personal computer. So the company I worked for sold the first Apple computer ever sold, and that grew to being the large computer sales organization. And then in the last 10 years, I've been working with businesses on their leadership, customer service, sales, marketing kind of things. How can we improve our revenue, our business? And
you call yourself a revenue mechanic.
Yeah, my customers have said, that's a good description. I may have to do sales training for one or customer service for another, and listen to the car, what kind of noises it's making, and then give the prescription and the fix.
Well, and how did you decide to get into that niche?
It really was kind of brought to me by my customers. They initially it was universities and colleges, and then they came back and said, could we hire you to go to our corporate clients and help them with sales training? Or they really liked you, could you do a leadership retreat? And so one thing kind of led to the other.
Well, and I know also you speak all over the country.
Yeah, it's been fun. I mean, I get paid to travel to other cities to tell jokes and stories. And I mean, you can't get a better job than that.
And that sounds like a really good gig.
Yeah.
Yeah. I know your communication style is that of a storyteller, and I'm sure we will hear some stories today.
Hopefully.
Yeah, I'm sure we will. Let's talk about one of your favorite subjects, which I know is charisma.
Okay.
What is charisma?
Well, if we turn back the clock 100 years ago, people bought commodities. They dug it out of the ground and took it to market. And then 50 years ago, people had packaged those. They had now bought manufactured products. 10, 15 years ago, that had morphed to the next level, which was a service. And so during that last 50 years, we moved from packages to serving customers. Well, by the turn of this century, customers kind of expected customer service. They wanted something better. And so we've moved into a world of customer experiences.
Uh-huh.
And so that's kind of where cutting edge companies are going, is with customer service. But in our research, we've asked, because our customers want to know where the hockey puck is going to go. Mm-hmm. We want to get there before everybody else does. And so the question is asked, what is the next level past customer service? and past customer experiences. And there is a place where experiences become a wow.
Okay.
And so we said to customers, we said to our survey audience, what companies represent that wow? And so they gave us a list of companies.
Mm-hmm.
And then we said, what is it about those companies that make them so much of this wow? And as we looked at what they said, we found a common word, and that's charisma. These organizations are charismatic.
Okay.
And so we just described it as business charisma. These organizations have this special something. And in that process for our show today, we determined that there are things that there's enough science and research on what individuals can also do to be charismatic. So we'll talk about that, I think, probably today.
We will. Absolutely. And I understand that not only now are you doing speaking and so on and so forth, but you've graduated to some, shall we say, demonstrations.
Oh, yeah. Well, yeah. So we've got some visual aids. So if we say this is business charisma, if we could just put this in the bag and label this as business, this would be great for businesses or for an individual.
Absolutely.
If we said if we could put charisma in this for people, that would be great. And so companies like Starbucks or Coca-Cola, they've been determined to be charismatic. And so if we said, here's the watcher, our TV watcher, here's their life, if we could dip them in to charisma, then that would change their world.
It sure would.
It would help them become a more powerful person. And then if we took the magic of Coca-Cola and poured in there and took their magic, their charisma, then that would help get skills or abilities. And so if we take the person and put them into charisma, then we're able to take the magic of Coca-Cola, and we're able to take that and make it something that they can use in their own life. So if we say, well, is that enough? I mean, is there something that's a trick about this? Well, the trick really is it a trick if we take and take that which we think is magical and say, well, no, it's not a trick. We just need to understand how the trick works. And so that's why we want to talk about charisma. It's not that charisma is magic. It's what can we do to make it magical.
Okay.
I think of the story of Marilyn Monroe.
Everyone knows Marilyn Monroe.
Marilyn Monroe was walking the streets of New York City, and as she was walking the streets, she was with the editor of Red Book and a photographer for Red Book. And she turned to the photographer and she said, "Shall I be her?" And he looked at her like, "What?" She said, "Shall I be her?" And he must have been perplexed. She took off her coat, she handed it to the editor, and she struck a pose and fluffed her hair. And somebody on the street said, "It's Marilyn Monroe." And somebody else went, "Look, it's Marilyn." And next thing, within just a few seconds, she was thronged there on the sidewalk of New York City. And they had trouble extricating her from the crowd. The crush was so huge. And they got her out of there, and the editor of Red Book said, "I was amazed that somebody who was Billie Jean Baker was able to flip a switch and turn on her charisma and instantly become Marilyn Monroe." And so the question is asked, are there switches that charismatic companies, but especially for your watchers, are there switches that you can turn on individually that will make you more personable, more magnetic, warm, influential? And so let's talk about some of those.
Right. So she knew the trick. She knew exactly how to do it. She was aware of it. So Kordell, help us out. How do we do it?
Well, that's a great example. And we have a few minutes, so let's talk about some examples. I love this example because it's so real. It applies to your watchers. We have these phones, and there's, I think the statistic is there's 3 to 5 billion pictures that are uploaded every couple of minutes onto the web. So telephones are a new way of life for many of us. And so we all have our pictures put on the internet. If you don't, then you're probably a serial killer. And so you've got to think about how do you get your picture on the phone. So here is how do you make your picture good and then communicate personality, charisma in your picture. So let's look at this camera and I'll show you how this works so the watchers can see how that works. So if I'm looking at this camera and I have the person with the camera takes my picture and I'm facing this way, that's called a mugshot.
Yeah, and what police station are you in?
That's right.
Yeah.
But if I want a business picture, then what I do is I turn my shoulders 45 degrees to the camera. And that then becomes a business picture. But if I want to communicate personality, then I do this with my head. I just slightly lean in. As silly as it sounds, that communicates personality. And in the picture, that's essential so that you can stand out, you can be warm, you can be personable. In fact, I went and got my driver's license renewed a week and a half ago, and so I looked at the camera, turned my shoulders.
Because typically they're mugshots.
Oh, yeah. And did the slight tilt. The guy hands me my license, and he looks and he says, "Boy, you take great pictures." so this part of how we communicate our personality can be learned. It can be, there are skills that we can develop, just like a surgeon or a concert pianist. They have to practice and develop some of these skills.
So what else can we do?
Well, great question. About 80%, because charisma is assigned by the other person. Charisma, this magical fairy dust of influence that makes people just instantaneously like you. They assign a power to you that can't be substituted by anybody else. If it's Walt Disney, there's no substitution for Disney. If it's Apple computer, there's no substitution. Well, a charismatic person or a business has that kind of impact. And so if we want people to assign that to us as a person, we need to understand that there are things we do with them that allows us to be charismatic.
So it's a duel, or more of a dialogue than a monologue, giving the impression of charisma.
Almost a dance, as it were.
Okay.
So for an example, since 80% of charisma is assigned to those who listen to, understand us, and give us advice on who we are, we assign it to the other person based mostly on how well they listen. And the average person thinks at about, let's say 200 to 300, they speak at about 200 and 300 words a minute. But we think at about 3,000 words a minute. We're thinking about
difference.
10 times faster than what the person's talking. So as you're looking at the other person, they're talking, and you're listening, but you're thinking 10 times faster than they're speaking, and so you're usually doing this. You're nodding your head and you're saying, yeah, that's really interesting, but you're thinking, I wonder if I've got enough milk at home. Or do I need to rotate the tires on my car? Yes, that's really interesting. I wonder if my 401k is properly assigned. And so although you're listening, you think that they think you're listening, they can look at you and tell if you're listening or not. And so there are things you can do to let them know, hey, I'm listening to you with my full mind, but I'm also communicating that I'm listening to you in other ways. And so you start adding those various methods together, and it ups the amount of personality, of character, of persuasion, of influence that you have, even though you're not even saying anything.
Okay, so what are they?
So one thing, when you listen to somebody, if you're listening to somebody and you do this with your eyes, I get these, my wife calls these the 11s.
Okay.
You get these gel bars going between your eyes. If I do that to you, what are you thinking when you see my face making these gel bars?
Well, you're concentrating. You're focused on what I'm saying.
And might I be saying, yeah, he's saying that, but I got to think about this. So these gel bars tend to make you so you're not seen as listening. So the secret, instead of doing gel bars, is, it's a silly term, I call it rain brows. Instead of focusing your forehead closed like this, you raise your eyebrows and put wrinkles across your head. And so if you raise your eyes like that and listen to somebody, the facial expression is, wow, he's really interested in what I'm saying. So let's practice.
Okay.
Look at the camera and show them your rain brows.
My rain brows.
Look at the camera like you're really listening to them.
Right.
See the difference? And so this communicates that you're really connecting with others. Now, aside from that facial expression, when you listen to others, there are ways that your body communicates that. So one is, if you're listening to them, you often say, yeah, I hear that. Now, if I do this, yeah, that's not seen as personable and warm. It's kind of like, yeah, what do you got? Let's go, let's go.
Okay.
But if you slow down the head nod, that's considered charismatic, more warm feeling. Another thing we do when we listen to others is we tend to move the head. Really? You feel that all the time? I'm surprised. Now, I'm exaggerating, but we move around our head when we listen. What was that? You do what? I can't believe that. We touch our face. Wow. Another thing we do is we move around in our seat. Our derriere covers geography. Are you kidding me? Why would you do that? And so, again, I'm exaggerating, but over 5 or 10 minutes, if your face, your head movement, your derriere, all those things people are looking at, and they can tell, oh, this person really is listening to me.
So body language is
Very
crucial.
much so. Very much so. Another thing is we have a thing called limbic resonance. There are mirror neurons in the brain that look out and see those around us. It's kind of a protect yourself from the saber-toothed tiger in the bush kind of thing.
Okay.
If somebody else is doing something, we tend to mirror them and say, run, run. Well, limbic resonance would say, if somebody's sitting and I'm talking to them and I mirror their body language, like right now I'm doing with you,
exactly,
then the person who I'm mirroring, and I'm not modeling about that, but I'm just very casual about that. If I mirror their body language, they tend to say, I like this guy.
Okay.
It's the same thing when somebody sneezes, somebody else sneezes, pretty soon those
Or a yawn and a yawn.
yawns. And yawns are, you watch a 30-second video on yawning, 60% of the people are going to yawn within the next 2 minutes, right? And so that's this limbic resonance, that what people are saying and doing, if we mirror, associate with that, then we tend to drive up acceptance, personality, persuasion, charisma.
Is there a difference between personality and charisma?
No, because there are introverts who are very charismatic, and we often associate with extroverts. But no, there's no two personalities that have a lock on charisma. Although there is something about sexes that we ought to probably talk about.
Okay, and I think, is that something called uptalk?
Uptalk.
Okay.
A charismatic person drops the tone on the last word of a sentence. If I say, boy, that is one black cup, if by dropping the tone on cup, that is seen as more powerful. Well, when women meet each other, they tend to do uptalk. Hey, it's so good to see you. I'm so glad we got to get our kids together. They raise their voice at the end of sentences. And that tends to be more like dogs wagging their tails, people smiling. You smile, there's 350 muscles that constricts your voice. When you smile, it makes your tone of your voice go up. It's more friendly, it's more open. Well, charismatic people are powerful. They have a real clout, a presence. And so they tend to drop the tone versus having it go up. When women meet each other, they do a lot of uptalk, and so you have to counsel them, coach them. At first you're going to go up, but then you want to vary between up and down, because that communicates charisma, magnetic presence. And for men, if you ask someone asks you a question, if you say, yeah, that's not charismatic. If they ask you a question and you wait 2 seconds, that's charismatic. You say, Kordell, so how are you today? Well, I'm really good.
So you're thinking about it, you're giving that pause, that pregnant pause, as folks used to say.
And those pauses, both before you answer and during a sentence, are seen as more powerful and more charismatic.
Okay. One of the things, Kordell, that I know you've done in the past that just absolutely fascinates me is to act as a graphic facilitator. And you might be saying, okay, what does graphic facilitation have to do with charisma? But I think there's a connection there.
During the last 20 or 30 years, there's been a trend in business to move faster, to deal with information faster, to get more feedback from peers and employees, cast members, whatever you want to call them. And so there's a movement that's kind of taken seat, it is in place, whereby I will take a blank wall and put a large sheet of paper on it, 4 foot by 10 feet. And then with a series of magic markers, I'll ask a group of executives or business owners or church members, ask them a series of questions, and as they give the answers, I'd write their answers on this sheet of paper. Of course, it's helpful if you could draw cartoons and stick figures and all that stuff. But time you get done, you get everybody's feedback. They don't realize it, but you're making sure everybody talks, everybody has, and then by using some common tools, we can get them to pick which of these ideas are most important, which ones we should act upon. And so there's rules, methods that you use to get people to agree on what you've written on the wall. When you get all done, they're ecstatic. They said, that's awesome. You got us to do things that we haven't been able to do for months and years.
Well, and the facilitations that I've seen, that I've watched you do, it's amazing that someone's speech or dialogue or conversation can be encapsulated in some sheets of paper, and one can actually look at that. It's like a really cool way to take notes.
It's become very common. You see it on the internet now where people will talk and somebody else will graphically represent it. It's a fun method to get people to, dare I say it, listen to each other. And so it's powerful. In our day and age, there used to be the internet. Now we want people to use the internet to talk to each other.
Okay, so talking about charisma, is that a strategy that you use for success in your life? And what are your other strategies for success?
You know, there are, success itself is a relative term. We all successfully navigated all those school classes. But all those hundreds of teachers of classes that we went through, there's really only 3, maybe if you're lucky, 4 or 5 teachers that really brought about change in your world. And so is success enough, or do you want those teachers who are significant? And so there's a difference between success and significant.
Okay.
To listen to somebody is successful, but to hear what they're really thinking and feeling and saying, that's significant. Charisma is significant. I love the story of Steve Jobs. He turned to John Scully and he said, I want you to come to Apple. And Scully said, why? He said, do you want to sell sugared water or do you want to change the world? And so we really are at a place where we need to put our dent into the universe, and that comes from really connecting with others. We need to develop this charisma, dare I say, love and caring for others. We need to go there. We don't have a choice.
What do you think will happen if we don't?
Then we will be relegated to the average, the mediocre, what everybody else is doing. We're in a world of price, the lowest price wins. But in a world where all those who are fighting for the scraps, those who have the personality, the caring, the connectedness, those people are going to raise to the top. They're going to have success in a very powerful and real way.
Okay. I think, Kordell, that one last comment.
One last comment?
Yeah.
Make your dent in the universe. We're inundated with information, huge amounts of information, 3 times more today than we were in 1984. We're 3 times smarter. No. And so when all this information is coming at us, we choose to make decisions. We choose to act based on our heart. And so now more than ever, we need to think about how are we connecting with people in a very real way. The imperative is, let's stop reading the life like it's an internet website. Let's start dialoguing, turn off Facebook, and talk to real people.
Kordell, thank you so much.
Thanks,
This
Doug.
has been wonderful. At this time of year, many graduates are looking for a job, and in doing so, they often have to fill out a resume or an application or both. Seems like a simple process. Now think about this. Many companies are asking for an email address. Why? Because then it's easy to reach the applicant. So think about the email address that is listed on the resume. For instance, if the email address is partyanimal@partylikethereisnotomorrow.com, what do you think the response of the person is who is doing the hiring? I don't think so.